Imagine a time when justice wasn't about fairness. It was about fear. A time when people believed pain could cleanse the soul, when screams were considered proof of truth. They didn't have police stations or lawyers, only iron devices, fire, and rope. Back then, punishment wasn't meant to correct a crime, it was designed to break a person's spirit. They called it justice. But today, we call it horror. During the Middle Ages, the concept of justice was brutally different from what we know today. Across Europe, in castles, cathedrals, and cobblestone courts, the accused had little chance of mercy. The church and monarchy ruled with absolute power, and to question them was to question God himself. Punishments were meant to terrify the masses. They believed that if the punishment was painful enough, it would scare others from committing the same sin. So, public torture became a form of theater. Crowds gathered in town squares, cheering as the condemned screamed. It wasn't hidden behind prison walls, it was entertainment. In their eyes, this was order. In ours, it's cruelty beyond imagination. Let's walk through the dark halls of history, where iron and blood became symbols of the law. The rack-A wooden frame with ropes tied to each limb. The more you denied your crime, the tighter they turned the handle. Bones dislocated, muscles tore, and the screams echoed through the dungeons. Many confessed to crimes they never committed just to make it stop. The Iron Maiden, a human-shaped coffin lined with spikes inside. The victim was locked inside, standing upright, unable to move. The spikes piercing just enough to draw blood, without killing immediately. It was slow, deliberate, and horrifyingly effective. The breaking wheel, one of the most feared punishments in medieval Europe. The accused was tied to a large wooden wheel, and executioners shattered each limb with a heavy iron club, sometimes weaving the broken body through the spokes, and leaving it for birds to feed upon. This they called justice for traitors. The pillory, a wooden frame that locked a person's head and hands in place. But this was no simple restraint. The real punishment came from the public mockery. Rotten food thrown, sometimes stones, sometimes boiling water. People could die not from the device but from humiliation and infection. Each device told the same story. Punishment wasn't about truth. It was about power. It's impossible to talk about medieval justice without mentioning the church. During the Inquisition, the church became both judge and executioner. They believed torture could purify souls, that pain could force confessions out of sinners. If you were accused of witchcraft, heresy, or even owning a forbidden book, you could be arrested without evidence. The torture chambers of the Inquisition were filled with unimaginable devices. The thumbscrew, the heretic's fork, the chair of nails. One of the most disturbing beliefs was that the innocent would be protected by God. So if you survived drowning, you were guilty. If you died well, God had taken you to heaven. Justice in those days was twisted by faith and fear. The line between holiness and horror was blurred forever. Execution was not just a sentence, it was a celebration. People came from nearby villages to witness death. Vendors sold food. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders to get a better view. The condemned were paraded through the streets, forced to confess their sins publicly before facing their fate. Beheading was considered merciful. Hanging was for thieves. Burning was for witches and heretics. And while today such acts are seen as monstrous, back then, it was a ritual, a performance meant to remind everyone who held power and what happened when you defied it. One of the most haunting accounts comes from the 15th century France. A man named Gilles de Rais, a nobleman accused of heinous crimes. He was tortured for days before confessing to every accusation. True or false didn't matter anymore. His confession sealed his fate execution by hanging and burning. Then there was the Witch of Bideford, accused of casting spells that brought bad harvests. Her trial lasted minutes. Her screams lasted hours. All for a superstition. And in Germany, the iron chair became infamous, a seat covered in sharp spikes, heated from below by fire. Each confession extracted by agony. Each word written in blood. These weren't monsters or villains. They were ordinary people caught in the machinery of justice. Why such brutality? Because fear controls better than reason. Medieval rulers understood that pain silences rebellion. When people see what happens to the accused, they don't question authority, they obey it. That's why executions were public and punishments were exaggerated. It was never about the criminal. It was about the message. Obey, or this will be you. By the late 17th and 18th centuries, new ideas began to spread. The Age of Enlightenment questioned